Hey everyone, it's Dina Mallory, the Director of Public Programs at Bennington Museum. Normally this time of year I'm looking forward to visiting a lot of classrooms and a lot of classrooms coming here to the museum to check things out, but this year's a little bit different and we can't actually be together. But that doesn't mean I can't still show you some of the cool stuff that we have here at the museum. So today I am in the Battle of Bennington Gallery and we're going to spend a little time in here. So just a shout out to all of you teachers who are trying to teach remotely and to you parents who have suddenly found yourselves spending a lot of time with your kids and looking for information for them. I'm going to be putting some links to additional information and some great primary documents and other resources in the comments after the video, so you can use those. So here we are in the Battle of Bennington Gallery, and the Battle of Bennington Gallery celebrates a Revolutionary War battle that happened right around here, not in Bennington, we'll talk about that later. It happened in Walloomsac, New York. And when you walk into this gallery, first thing I like to do with students is let them take a look around because there's a lot of interesting stuff in here. So we're going to start with a little look around. So the first thing you notice when you walk into this gallery is this cannon and the carriage that it sits on, that big thing that the wheels and everything else, that's called the carriage of the cannon. Believe it or not, this cannon actually is not real. It was made in 2018 and it's made out of wood. When you visit the museum, you can actually touch this cannon and imagine what it might have been like to be the one firing it. And sometimes you can't even believe that it's made out of wood until you've had a chance to touch it. Let's see what it looks like from behind. Cool. And I like that it's something that you can touch that's in the museum. This cannon, on the other hand, is not made of wood, it's made of brass, and it's a real cannon. Let's just take a look around at a few of the other things that are in the cases. I'm sorry for the glare on the windows, but you'll get an idea of some of the neat things that we have in here. These really long guns. Maybe you can see them better if I go this way. Some pretty cool swords. We've got this great big painting, and on another day we're going to spend a lot of time looking at and talking about this painting because it's a really interesting one. If you've been here at the museum and had a lesson on the Battle of Bennington with me, you know there's an awful lot to see in that painting. So one of the things that I like to ask students about all of those things that I just showed you in the case, do you think that those things are really 243 years old, like really that old, or do you think that they're copies? What do you think? Well, the cool thing about a museum like this one is that we show you the real thing. Those things that we just looked at in the case, they really are from the Battle of Bennington. I think that's pretty cool. Another thing that kids often want to know is, how did the museum get these things? Well, that's a really good question. And when this museum first started, it was started by a bunch of people who were really interested in the Battle of Bennington and in the history of the town of Bennington. And a lot of those people were the ones who created the museum. And a lot of them donated or gave things to the museum so that the museum could take really good care of them so that we could see things in the cases 243 years after they were used. Now, museums also get things by buying things. So some of the things that you'll see in the other galleries are things that the museum has purchased over the years. But I think it's safe to say that most of the things in this particular exhibit are things that were donated to the museum. So let's take a closer look at some of the things that we saw in the case. We're going to start with one of the most commonly used weapons during the Revolutionary War. It was called Brown Bess musket, or if you wanted to call it something longer, you could call it a smooth bore muzzle loading musket. Now this one that I have in my hands is not real. It is a replica or a copy, and it has never actually been a gun that could fire, never will be, but it'll help us do the job of showing you how it was used. So, it's called a smooth bore muzzle loading musket. The smooth bore part comes from this. The inside of this, you can't see it, but the inside of that is smooth. That makes it different from a rifle. A rifle has a groove, a spiral groove, carved all the way through the inside of the barrel of the gun. And the bullet travels through that spiral. So when it comes out of the gun, it's kind of spinning like a nicely thrown football. Well, most people didn't have that kind of gun during the Revolutionary War. Unfortunately, those kinds of guns are a lot more accurate than the musket was, because it's smooth and your musket is like, hold on, it's just like a little lead marble, like that. So when you fired this gun, it kind of wiggled around in there a little bit, and when it came out, it was a little less accurate, a little more difficult to hit what you were aiming for. The muzzle loading part comes because you load the gun through the muzzle, which is this part here. So to load the gun, first you need one of these, a cartridge, sometimes called a charge. And the cartridge is basically just a tube of paper. It's got a musket ball in one end. The rest of the tube is filled with gunpowder. And when you're ready to load your gun, the first thing that you do is tear open this tube. I'm not really going to do it. But you tear open the tube with your teeth. And in the comments, I'm going to post a video of someone actually demonstrating how this works. It's much cooler than me doing it for fake. So you tear it open with your teeth, and you pour a little bit of the gunpowder, I'll turn it around so you can see it better, onto what's called the pan of the gun. That's this part right here. So you would pour a little bit onto the pan, then you would lock it in place. The rest of it, the rest of the gunpowder, the musket ball, even the paper, all goes into the muzzle of the gun. And then you would take out this rod here, which is called a ramrod. On mine, it doesn't come out. Like I said, it's just a replica. But if it were a real musket, you'd be able to take that out and you'd use it to pack everything down into the barrel of the gun. Then you'd be ready to fire your gun. And mine doesn't really fire, so we won't see that. This part has a little bit of a rock called flint in it. And when you fire it, that flint flies forward and hits the pan where we put that gunpowder and makes a little bit of a spark. And that spark travels through a tiny hole in the barrel of the gun, and that spark ignites the rest of the gunpowder and causes the gun to fire. So a soldier would practice and practice and practice until he got really good at this, and if he was really good at it, he could fire his gun about 4 times a minute, or once about every 15 seconds. A real musket, like this one, a brown bess musket, weighs about 10.5 pounds, which is about the same as a full-grown cat or a gallon bucket of paint. So they were kind of heavy. Now cartridges were stored in cartridge boxes, and I'm going to show you first one of the ones in the case so that you can see what a real one looks like, and then we'll look at a fake one up close. Okay, so this is the outside of one of our cartridge boxes. You can see that it's got kind of a cool design on it, and what might be a little bit harder to see is that the owner of this this cartridge box carved his name and some letters into it. That was pretty common. The soldiers had a lot of downtime, so they would carve things into their cartridge boxes or their powder horns. And this one over here shows you what the inside looks like. Now let's look at one that I have that we can really look at up close. So this again is a replica or a copy made to look like the real thing, but the great thing about it is we don't have to keep it behind a case and we can really check it out. So you see that it's basically just a wooden box with holes carved into it, and it's covered in leather. Now that part's really important because you want your cartridges, your charges, to stay dry. Gunpowder like this wouldn't work if it got wet. So it was really important to keep these little tubes from getting wet, and the leather protects it from the rain. And you can see that the holes are just the right size for the cartridges to fit into. So before you went into battle, you wanted to make sure that all of those holes were filled up with your cartridges. Now, this cartridge box hangs on a strap, and the soldier would wear it right around his shoulders. I'll show you that in a minute. But I also want to show you that this one has attached to the strap tools called a whisk and a pick. And the whisk and the pick were really important because they were what you used to keep your musket clean. And that was really important if you wanted your musket to work correctly. So here I am wearing the cartridge box now around my shoulder the way that the soldier would. We're going to find out that the soldier would be wearing a lot of things across his shoulders. In fact, if you have ever noticed in this painting, if you've had a chance to see it, it looks like a lot of the soldiers have these white X's across their uniforms. But those white X's aren't really part of their uniforms. It's just the straps from all the stuff that they're wearing. These things here are called musket ball molds. And they were used for making musket balls. Now I've got one that I can show you that looks very much like this. Let's get that out for you. Here it is. And the way that these worked was they were used for making musket balls out of lead. So the soldiers would have their allotment of lead or their bars of lead, and they would melt that lead down over a fire. And then you would pour that melted lead into the hole in the top of the musket ball mold. Let it cool down, and then open it up, and voila, you've got one musket ball that will fit your musket perfectly. So that's it for today. If you want to know more about the things that I've shown you in the cases, you'll find information about them in the comments section, plus a video that I found, I told you about, of someone demonstrating loading the brown bass. I hope that you will come to visit Bennington Museum and see this gallery in person as soon as you can. Until then, keep learning.